My name is Doug Ebert. I'm the Senior Advisor for Greater Zurich Area, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. I'd like to take a moment to welcome all of you to this, the 14th webinar in our webinar series. Before we launch into the webinar itself, please allow me to cover a few housekeeping issues. Next slide. As you can see from this slide, as you will note, the discussion material will be on the right-hand window pane, and then on the left-hand column, you will be able to control your audio input as well as write questions for the Q&A that will be coming up. The Q&A session will in fact come at the conclusion of the presentations. Next slide. Without further ado, I'd like to begin with a brief introduction of our panelists. I'm pleased to introduce to you our key panelist and regulatory expert, Dr. Maria Hine Gartner. Dr. Hine Gartner is CEO of Regulat Switzerland GmbH, and since 2012 has practiced as principal consultant for Target Bioscience. Additionally, she served 8 years as general manager for Genzyme and 8 years as business unit manager for Schering-Plough. Maria brings 15 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, holds a PhD in biology from the University of Munich and a Bachelor of Science from the University of Houston, Texas. We're very pleased to have Maria as part of our panel, as she is a recognized expert in the regulatory environment throughout Europe. Welcome, Marie. In terms of my own background and introduction, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Doug Ebert. I serve as Senior Advisor to the Greater Zurich Area. I have over 25 years of experience in economic development and foreign direct investment, having had engagements with a number of cantonal and regional development agencies in Switzerland, as well as several other state governments. Much of my focus has been in the area of life science. Prior to my work in economic development, I specialized in workforce development as VP of Consulting and Client Services for an international outplacement firm. As I mentioned, I'll serve as your moderator today. With that being said, and without further delay, I'd like to present a brief overview of the region. Our goal today is to give you some insight into the region itself, and then, of course, jump into the regulatory hurdles that you might be confronted with. As you can see in the first slide, a number of recent surveys have shown that this region, the region of Switzerland that we represent, the Greater Zurich Area, leads the world in life science innovation and talent, with the highest level of growth prospects for bio as well as medtech companies among developed countries. And you can see in the corner of that slide the developed countries that are represented in this particular study. In the lower left-hand corner, you'll see that you'll be in good company with others that have chosen the area for regional headquarters, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. As you can see from the next slide, under the this life science and innovation talent. Next slide, please, Malene. The life science and innovation talent is driven by and supported by world-renowned academic institutions. You'll get a picture of those in that upper left-hand corner. It's important, I think, to understand that the model for R&D collaboration and product development in Switzerland is quite different than many other models across the globe. If you're doing collaborative R&D with these institutions, you own the IP. It's yours to commercialize and exploit as you see fit. Next slide. You'd be in great company, as you can tell. The number of companies that have selected this region for their preferred location for pan-European and or EMEA headquarters is quite significant. Companies realize that the Swiss market itself is not that large. However, the central location in the heart of Europe, combined with stability, strong fiscal support, and a multilingual workforce, provide an ideal combination to support commercialization activities as well as R&D activities throughout the world. As you take a look at that slide, you'll see a number of very familiar names. Next slide. One of the key important features, I think, of the region is the life science education, and that coupled with innovation in the greater Zurich area. As I alluded to earlier, these particular institutions have developed worldwide reputations and offer a tremendous opportunity for companies to collaborate in a variety of different areas. Next slide. These are samples of some of the innovation centers, business incubators, and tech parks in the greater Zurich area. I won't go into detail with all of these simply because there's so much to be said about each one. Additional information about these institutions, these centers, and tech parks will be available on our website, and you'll be receiving a printout of this activity at the conclusion of the presentation. I think it's this collaboration that provides us with the fact that this is why the highest density of life science companies have chosen the greater Zurich area for their location of choice. It's more or less in our DNA. Next slide. Again, you can see the continued experience that you can gain in collaborating with these institutions. Next slide. Again. And again. Just to reiterate, the highest density of life science companies in Switzerland fall within this region. As you can see, the greater Zurich area region covers the German border on the north and the Italian border on the south. We are very pleased to have collaboration from multiple cantons within the greater Zurich area region. Next slide. Our setup is a public-private partnership. Our public partners include the cantons of Glaris, Grisons, Schaffhausen, Schwyz, Solothurn, Ticino, Uri, Zurich, Zug, as well as the city of Zurich and the region of Winterthur. And you can see as well, we have a significant number of private partners that help to support your activities here. We welcome you to explore and look at the greater Zurich area. At this point, I would like to turn over the presentation to Dr. Hine Gartner. As I mentioned before, she brings to us a significant amount of expertise in the regulatory environment, which is well recognized throughout Europe. Dr. Hine Gartner, it's all yours.
Joining us. Thank you, Doug, for your introduction very much. And hello, everybody joining this webinar. So in the next 20 minutes, I hope to provide you with some clarity on how to navigate out of the regulatory maze when expanding your pharmaceutical or biotech business into the European Union. Just a second, I have problems with maybe. Okay, here we go. So before I start with the subject, let's do some housekeeping with terminology. When I say authorized or authorization, I mean an official governmental or institutional authorization, also called sometimes just certificate or license. And when I say medical product, sometimes I will say just product, I mean your drug, not a medical device. And when I say local, I always mean any specific EU member state, whereas member state has always the same meaning as a country. So when I say local subsidiary, I mean your local entity, your office in any of the 28 member states. So now let's look at the required authorization to market your medicinal product in the EU. Basically, there are only three types of authorization, one for your product, one for your subsidiary, and one for price of your drug. The authorization for your product, the so-called marketing authorization, you will receive from medicinal agency, abbreviated EMA. The recipient of this authorization will be only one local subsidiary, your local subsidiary, and this subsidiary will legally be held responsible for safety of your product in all EU countries. From my experience, US headquarters regulatory departments have a great knowledge of this process and already contracted some of EU regulatory service providers and have this process well under control. Therefore, I will not go into this kind of authorization. This is pretty straightforward process, similar to your new drug application NDA with FDA. Then you will need, and I jump here to the lower row, you will need a authorization for your price. This authorization you will have to receive from each local authorities in which you want to sell your product. And I also will not go into this type of authorization. These are mighty complex undertaken, different in each member state, issued by different functioning health authorities, and deserve special attention and maybe a special webinar. So what I will go into the authorization for your subsidiaries. So here, and let me maybe show you exactly, here we are. You will need one authorization required to import your product to EU and sell it centrally in other countries of your choice, called Manufacturing and Import Authorization, or abbreviate MIA. And then you will need, additionally to this MIA, here, one or more authorization for subsidiaries in countries in which you want to sell and market your product locally. This authorization is called Wholesale Distribution License, abbreviated WDL, or sometimes WDA for Wholesale Distribution Authorization, which is one and the same thing. So the reason why I have chosen only this aspect to talk today about is my experience that most of the US companies here have well under control marketing authorization and pricing, but tend to neglect or forget or don't know the requirements for the subsidiaries MIA and VDL. So let's look now in a schematic manner on this at this concept, central versus local distribution. So you have already your manufacturing, you have your non-EU or US warehouse, and now you need to decide which one of the EU countries do you want to import your product. So you will need to establish your subsidiary there first, obtain the manufacturing and import authorization, the MIA, and find a distributor or a warehouse in this country. This decision may have some fiscal consequences, but there you have to find a tax specialist, either with the help of Greater Zurich area or, which I always recommend, contact just directly KPMG. And now, let me show you. If you decide, for whatever particular reason, to operate here through a local wholesale and develop local marketing activities, you will need to establish there your own subsidiary and obtain a whole distribution license. If you decide to distribute your product through third-party logistics directly to your end customer and do not develop any marketing activities, then you do not need your own subsidiary and you do not need for this subsidiary the VDL license, and makes everything easier. Now let's take a look, kind of go back, and let's take a look at some EU directives and guidelines issued by the EU Commission, which are relevant for your subsidiaries and which understanding will help you to make the right decision how to proceed and will help you to get out of the so-called maze. So basically you see good manufacturing practice, good vigilance practice, good distribution practice, all well defined, not easy but possible to follow. So I'm asking, where does the maze come from? And I tell you, the maze comes from the fact that each member state has its own health authority, and each health authority has different ways of implementation and different set of requirements how to obtain this VDL, in what case, and how long does it take. From far away, the VDL requirements look very similar. You have to have a quality system, which usually consists of a number of standard operating procedures describing processes which are relevant for the safety of the product, such as recall, returns, complaints, training, deviation handling, quality management reviews, etc. You usually need a qualified person. Some countries require full-time pharmacists for this position. In some countries, part-time outsourcing is possible, and in some countries, you don't need qualified person at all. Then you need technical quality agreements for any outsourced activity which is relevant to the safety of the product, and last but not least, inspection to confirm that the subsidiary is ready to handle the product in a safe way. So that's the legal base, legal requirements, different in each and every country, and you have, I just listed here some, not all, the most important one of mainly West European health authorities. And now I would like to move to a more practical example, which I hope further clarifies the whole process. So let's start down here. You have a product in phase 3. Maybe you have already submitted the marketing authorization application to EMA. Anyhow, you have a date of the anticipated EMA approval and the launch date. Thus, at the date of your anticipated launch, you will need to have in place following, and let's call it elements. You have your manufacturing site, already mentioned, with GMP certificate or successful inspection by EMA. You have identified and contracted your labeling facility, your testing facility, and your logistic partner handling, storage and transport, and eventually invoicing, depending how you're going to set up your business. Then you have identified and contracted pharmacovigilance central unit. And this central EU pharmacovigilance unit has already executed safety data exchange agreements with all your subsidiaries where you plan to launch your product. Then you need, of course, subsidiary holding your marketing authorization and which signs responsible for the safety of the product in EU, but this has been already done. And last but not least, you have established subsidiaries with WDL in place in countries where you decided to have local sales and local marketing. And for that, as already mentioned, you will need in each country a quality system consisting of a number of SOPs, usually 12 to 16, adapted to local situation, technical quality agreements, and a qualified person if required. Usually, you will not launch your product in all 28 member states, probably just in 15. And of course, not all 15 at the same time. You may work in waves of 3 countries at one time, or even prepare launch country by country. But important here is that you coordinate your launch sequence with your price and reimbursement group and start with countries known to have high price and end your launch sequence with low pricing countries. So this brings us to some homework that you have to do. You have actually to meet 7 complex decisions which have to be well harmonized and agreed between different departments. The financial department for the tax reason, and here I recommend to work with KPMG. The marketing department for marketing activities required to market and sell your product well. The regulatory department for the launch date, SMPC, indication formulation, patient information, labeling. You have your product supply group to identify and contract your third-party logistic supplier in the required time frame and according to your launch sequence. And quality department to set up a quality system, a global quality system which would fit and be adaptable to the requirements of the launching countries. And last but not less important, the price and reimbursement group should, in my opinion, decide on the launching sequence to take into account, I already mentioned it, EU price referencing system to start with the countries known for the high price and end with the countries known for the low price. So, in order to make this decision wisely, how to proceed, your departments will have to communicate closely and frequently, going over and over of any decision from different viewpoints. Deciding which country go with direct sales and which with local sales is the most complex and I think important decisions you will depend on some factors. For example, what kind of marketing activities are required to sell your product well? Will I need sales force and promotional material? How I'm going to organize returns, recalls, and complaints? And just an example, if I sell, for example, from one central unit, for example, from Germany, will my client want to return the product back to Germany instead of convenient local return? And the same works for invoicing. So this is all internal work. And here I would like to go back to the supply chain, supply chain connected with launch readiness and authorization required for launch readiness. As we already mentioned, manufacturing, non-EU warehouse, they should both comply with EU GMP and GDP requirements. Then you have your already importing subsidiary with manufacturing and import authorization. You have your packaging and labeling side, your third-party logistic, your central pharmacovigilance unit, and your analytical testing facility. With all, you have technical agreements, technical quality agreements in place, and of course, financial. But this is not part of this. Yeah, this lecture. And now comes an important decision. You have your price and possibly already some reimbursement in some countries. You have your launch sequence, and now you have to decide which countries go directly to your end customers and which countries you prefer to sell your product locally and develop local marketing and marketing activities. For this country, you will need wholesale distribution license and the local technical quality agreements with local service providers. Yes. So let us, if this is well understood, move to the conclusion side, the conclusion slide. And in summary, the conclusion, how to navigate out of the regulatory maze when entering EU pharmaceutical market is most important point is to start planning the supply chain well ahead of time. I recommend to start working in 2 years ahead of launch. And the question is, why so early? So as mentioned, you have to make 7 complex decisions on how to set up your operation in European Union. And this will require direct contact with your local service suppliers in order to learn detailed local requirements and design your operation tailored to your product. And let's call it phase 1. Now, based on this detailed knowledge tailored to your product, you should be able to decide on import country, local operation, and the launch sequence. Let's call it phase 2. And phase 3 would be the contracting with local suppliers, which you have identified. So from my experience, these 3 phases take plus minus 1 year. And then you come over to phase 4, which is implementation phase. And you will have to here to count also 1 year for your local partners to provide you with required authorizations. Some of them may take longer than 12 months, some shorter. So here I also listed for your convenience our local partners with whom we work since 15 years. One slide that you can really read it. And you can contact them directly if you need some support, or you can contact RegulaNet for one-stop shop package. But basically, we will also work with the local service providers. And well, here I think I should ask myself, or you can ask me, why Switzerland as a headquarter for EU operation is so popular. And the point is that I don't know the end answer, but I heard on several occasions from my clients that the availability of manpower, international manpower, and favorite labor law are the main reason for establishing the headquarters in Switzerland. So if you have now any questions, thank you very much for your attention.
Maria, thank you very much for that detailed presentation and for providing us with the information we know we now need to navigate the regulatory maze. I appreciate the insights that you provided us today. We have had a couple of questions that have been presented to us. Let me take a look at one here. Just as a refresher, one of the questions was regarding how long it takes to comply with EMEA regulations. How long is the general process?
The EMA process takes, according to EMA itself, 277 days, but it's sometimes less and sometimes more depending how fast a company can provide answers to the list of questions.
So it's really important for companies that are contemplating a global launch to do some strategic planning during this process and to make certain that they have all the bases covered, so to speak.
Sure. Doug, there is a huge working stream behind the application for a marketing authorization, and usually already established cooperation between European agency supporting application and headquarters in US. So this is a topic for itself and a working stream for itself. Yeah.
Second question regards compliance in all member countries. Must a company get approvals in all EU member countries, or is there reciprocity among the various members?
No, there is only one, as I mentioned, a centralized procedure valid for all 28 member states, but you have a choice, go through the mutual recognition procedure or decentralized procedure or even national authorization procedure, which nowadays is basically not very often used. Depends on the product you have. Rare diseases, HIV, cancer, autoimmune diseases, all biotech products, gene therapy, monoclonal antibodies, all have to go through centralized procedure. And once granted, it's valid for all EU member states.
Given that knowledge, where are we in terms of taking a look at what happens with the UK after Brexit? Should companies take steps now to operate from an EU reciprocal country, or do you have any comment on that at all?
Yeah, my comment would be that predictions are difficult to make, especially about the future. The Brexit story is already so long that we really don't know how it's going to end up. And in case of hard Brexit, probably it's going to look like Switzerland and then I would advise to move marketing authorization holder to EU country because it may not be valid anymore.
So that the process in Switzerland already takes care of that, and as a result, that makes us a very attractive region.
There's small a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Switzerland as a non-EU member state needs distinguished different marketing authorization from Swissmedic.
Yeah, exactly.
And the same may be the case with UK in the future.
So it looks like we've covered many of the questions already. Again, I would like to thank everyone for their attendance today. I would like to extend a particular thanks to Dr. Hine Gartner for her expertise in this area, and I welcome anyone who is participating to contact Dr. Hine Gartner individually, to contact our team here in the US, as well as our team in Switzerland. Many thanks to the people behind the scenes that made this possible. I would also extend an invitation for you to participate in upcoming webinars. I believe our next one is on June the 12th. And we will be talking about drone technology at that point in time. Again, thank you so much. You will be receiving information about this webinar. You can locate the PDF on our website, and there will be an email coming to you shortly. Thank you to all. This concludes our webinar for the day.